You're listening to Guitar Talk with Dave and John.
Hey, welcome back to Guitar Talk. I am Dave. John is not with us today, as you can see. He had some construction going on around his house and can't be here today. Today, I have a special guest. I have Maor Appelbaum, who is a mastering engineer who works on a lot of records and probably a lot that you like and have heard of, and some interesting ones that will be coming out. But Maor, why don't you give the people who watch the show an idea of what a mastering engineer does?
Mastering engineer is involved in the production at its latest stage. It's basically the buffer between the finishing touches of the sound to what the listener gets. I'm the last creative step and technical step where I can adjust levels, compression, EQ, make it brighter, darker, louder, compress, dynamics. Think of it as like if you go to a museum and you see a picture that's being presented, then the picture is placed on the wall, and what's surrounding it, including the light, is how it's presented. The picture itself was already done before.
Right.
But the way that the light is projected to it, from which angle and how bright the light is, will affect how you visualize that picture, because the picture is by itself what it is, but how the light is projected, it's how it's presented.
Sure.
How you see the contours, the shades, the colors, and also the frame that holds the picture will give you the focus on what to notice in the picture. Or if there's no frame, it's just a big white wall that the picture is on. Then it's basically part of the presentation, and it makes you connect with the music more. It can engage the listener and emphasize certain things that can enhance the listening experience.
Sure. And also, does it have something to do with making sure that there's somewhat of like a synergy between all the songs to make them sound like a cohesive one unit, as opposed to this was recorded at the record plant, this one was recorded at the Village Recorder, this one's at Conway, and you kind of want them all to have that same polished sound coming from one unity place?
That's true when it's an album or an EP or a compilation of songs.
Sure.
In mastering, we do singles, EPs, albums, promos, split vinyl, split EPs. So as long as it's one song, then you're just emphasizing that one. But once there's other songs in the project, whether it's the album or the EP, then you want to make it sound cohesive as possible and concise, and also flowing from one song to the other, making it feel as one whole thing.
Very cool. And so, just to give some people an idea, what was some of the favorite works that you've done that are out there that you listen to back and you're like, oh, that was on the spot?
I've done Faith No More, an album called Soul Invictus, which was their comeback album. And I've remastered their first album, We Care a Lot, in a special edition called the We Care a Lot Deluxe Band Edition. I did a Meatloaf album called Braver Than We Are. I did 5 Yes albums. One was a studio album called Heaven and Earth, and then all the others were live albums.
Nice.
I've done 3 records for Eric Ailes. The latest one, The Bookends, which actually was number 1 on the Billboard Blues charts. I've done the one before, Middle of the Road. The one before, which is called Good for Something. I've done records for Rob Halford, for Yngwie Malmsteen, for Sepultura, for Walter Trout, William Shatner, Fates Warning, Armored Saint.
Hold on, go back a second. You said Bill Shatner?
William Shatner, yeah, I did a prog rock album for him.
Oh, that's outstanding.
History.
Oh, that's great. Was he just talking? Because years ago he did a record where he was just speaking. I think he did the word Rocket Man, and he just sat there in a video smoking a cig. No, was he smoking a cigarette? I think he just talked it. I think it was Telly Savalas who smoked a cigarette, saying the words to Bread's "If." Hilarious stuff. So that keeps you busy. How long does a sorry?
By the way, to answer your question about that record was actually a prog rock record that had players like Steve Vai and George Duke, may his soul rest in peace, and a lot of other people. And Billy Sherwood produced it and played and even sang on it. And
Wow.
Shatner was doing the narration on it.
Right.
So think of it as a post-prog record with, or maybe just a kind of a prog with narration over it. So,
Yeah, George Duke, there's a monster player. He was unreal.
yep.
I love me some George Duke. Yeah, it's a shame he passed. Um, wow. So, how long is the process? Let's say you want to go in and you're going to do one song. How long is the setup process? And what does it entail? Like, what are you? Are you doing a lot of it by feel, and is it listen, you're relying on your ears? Do you use some type of meter to see where the EQ is sitting? Are you trying to do it visually? Is it a mix of both? What is the process? I'm curious myself because working on records myself and producing, the mastering was always something that it's sent off to somebody that knows that. And so I'm just curious, as a producer, what are you looking at?
Well, first of all, there's no set times of how long it takes because every song is different. It needs a different approach. I like to experiment with different ideas of which gear I should connect to, connect and run through, and how it reacts with the music and does it do to the sound. It's not about the metering. It's really about the feel. I listen to the song and I try to understand what makes it engage more with the listener. How can I make the person listening to this feel closer to the song or get into it in terms of feeling immersed by it, or just connecting to the emotions there more. And so it's experimentation. You try different things. You emphasize different frequencies or levels or compression. You find the sweet spot where you think it really works, and hopefully the artist likes it too.
I'm sure. Now, is there like who was the guy that was the guy for years as the master? Wasn't there like one guy in Hollywood for a long time?
Well, there were a few guys in the world that were really famous. One of them was Doug Sachs. He passed away. And then you have Bob,
Mm-hmm.
but he's on the East Coast. And then you have Bernie
What
Grundman,
was his name? What?
Bob Ludwig.
Bob Ludwig. Yes. Okay, that's the name that I recognized. Oh, he was an East Coast guy. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. And then in the West Coast, you have Bernie Grundman. But you also
Right.
had Doug Sachs, but Doug passed away some years ago. And you had
Yeah.
others on the East Coast, such as George Marino. He also passed away.
Oh yeah, Merino Sound. That I remember too. Yeah, he passed too, huh?
Yeah, he did a lot
Wow.
of the AC/DC and Led Zeppelin, and also Bob Ludwig did, Led Zeppelin, and Doug Sachs did
Yeah.
Floyd and a bunch of other stuff. They're all legends.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, because I do recall there was very few people. Like when you looked at a record, it was always the same three or four guys. You never, it wasn't like you had to memorize 100 names when it came to mastering.
Well, in the top, there were a certain amount that you would see in a lot of records, and then there's others that were on big records, but you would see them less. And then in time, those became on more records. Just like the ups, the changes in music
Right.
industry, and if that record became successful, then that guy got more work. It's
Yeah, for sure.
that when something hits, people are looking at who who did it. So
Now you and I go back, I want to say at least 10 years, and I'm trying to remember where we met. Where did you and I meet? Was it at West LA or was it
yeah,
before that?
no, I think it was West LA Music.
Now, were you friends with Zeev? Is that how it started?
Yeah, Zeev and I
Oh,
know each
okay.
other for probably more than a decade, and Zeev knew, that's what I do. I do mastering, and I would come in the shop and
Right.
sometimes buy stuff from Zeev, and every once in a while come in the shop and buy stuff, and yeah.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure if I met you back when I was playing in my band, The Big Angry, when I had Nick Menza playing in my band.
I worked with Nick.
Yeah, and
Nick,
I think I might. That's why I was thinking. Because I was thinking to myself, did I meet him at West LA? But for some reason, I had a feeling that we had met prior to that. Did you ever work with? I can't. And I'm blanking on his name, but Mike.
Mike Tachi,
Yes.
he worked on Metallica the Black
Yes.
Album. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I know.
Yes.
Yeah,
And okay, see, for some reason, I think I met him either through you or we met and we both knew him because I worked with Nick and Nick had worked with him and Nick and him were friends.
we did a EP together that was recorded at Sound City, and then
Okay.
and I don't remember. I think that the band existed for a while, and then he might have done other projects that he was starting to do. Then he joined Ohm.
Yeah. Yeah, we did some stuff at his house with Mike Tachi. We wired up his house to record the drums. And do you know Lee Carreri?
Heard that name before. I don't know.
He's a piano player, producer, really good producer and a piano player. He was in the movie Fame. People mostly know him his face from being in Fame, but the music stuff that he had produced over the years, I thought was really high quality. And he's who I met Mike through with Nick. And yeah, because I had that band, The Big Angry, and Nick played with us for 3 years, but it's a sad loss in the music and especially in the metal world to lose such a great soul as Nick was just a good guy. But yeah, so then you started coming into West LA with Zeev, and I saw you definitely more often there. And I think that's when you started working did you do like something for Ingve around 2009 or 10?
I started that record in 2008, summer of 2008, and
Oh,
it came out, I think, in October, maybe in October 2008 or beginning of actually, I think maybe written wise it would say 2009, but I think it was. I remember we worked on
right.
it summer 2008. Yeah, so I think it came out like in October 2008 or something like that. But I don't know if it's 2009 or 8, but probably in some places it would say 9, some 8. But it's around that time, and it's around the time where I would come visit Zeev. Yeah.
So now,
Uh,
are you,
The name of the album was Perpetual Flame.
oh, Perpetual Burn, wasn't
Oh
it?
no, no, Burn was Jason Becker. It was Perpetual Flame.
Oh, Perpetual Flame. Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
that's why it was in my head. That's funny. So when you're working on these mastering, do any of the artists get a hold of you and are like, hey, can I come down and hear what you're doing? Or are they hands off to the masterer, to
I've
the
had
mastering engineer?
I've had times where clients were sitting here. Sometimes it was producers, people. Some people don't like to attend. They want to do what they're doing. Some people do like to attend. Um, 99% of the work is unattended because it comes here from all over the world. And
Right.
even if it's from LA, people don't want to go on the 405 or the 101. They just, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
send you the files, do it. And in the end of the day, you really want them to check it on the systems they know well, right? Because they listen to the music.
Right.
I want them to be happy with it and see that it translates on their system. But once in a while, I'll have a
So
producer here, like Mike Link would come here, or
mhm.
certain artists like Billy Sherwood. Uh, it's just, some of them would come here, and some would just have me sing them.
So, and I see you have, looks like 3 sets of speakers there for listening, so you could hear them on different systems and hear what they sound like.
Well, mostly the PMC IB1s is the main speaker, and that's basically what is if you want to call it the
Are those the big ones?
yeah, those are these ones.
The
See
big
them?
one.
Yeah, a big one.
Yeah. They make some great stuff. I did some work with them back. I produced a record for Erin Ann Scott, and I worked with, do you know the engineer Ted White? Yeah, so I worked with Ted White, and we did a record for Erin Ann Scott, and PMC was using for a while. They asked if they could use a song that we produced that they could use for their demoing their speakers, which I thought was really cool. They thought the production was really good, and I'll send you the song so you can check it out. But it actually, I don't think it was ever mastered. Oh no, it was mastered. I just don't know if I have the mastered version, but I'll send it to you. You can see what you think of it when you put it to your speakers. So, so the PMCs were the big ones, and
Yes.
then what are those KFKs? Those white ones?
Yeah, well, the white ones are KRK V6S4, which is the series 4, the latest one, and then the upper ones up above them, they're the KRK V4S4, and then I have ref tones that are smaller, and then I also have some Neumann's KH310 here, and I have kind of more speakers.
Nice.
In a while I'll change, but mostly the speakers are more staying the same. It's more the desk that
Right.
that I change, the gear.
And how often do you do like a rough mastering pass and run out to the car and listen to it in the car?
I don't. That's more like I see more people do that in mixing than in my case.
Oh,
I
yeah,
am.
okay.
No, I mean, what
I
I
do
do.
that all the time. It's like I want to hear it in a car.
Well, the thing is, the way that the room is, and the tuning of the room and the speakers and everything that's involved is to reveal a lot of those things. And I'm here every day listening to music and working here, so it's very consistent, and you all the
Yeah.
time prove it. So it's not like the car mix or something like that. It's actually it's revealing stuff. And of course, if somebody tells me he heard it in the car and he needs more high end or low end or less high end or low end, then I also ask him if he heard it in other places just to make sure, because his stereo system might be boosted 10 on the bass, and then apparently in other systems it's not like that, and then I don't want to add something that will be, wrong. So I'll ask him, did you hear another system?
Also, how many times do you get into somebody's car and you're like, your car system sounds terrible? Every time I get in somebody's car, I'm always like, what the hell are you listening to?
I personally don't like car systems anyway. It's just some of them just rattle. It's some. I mean, some systems are amazing. Yeah, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
you know, just like I don't judge people by their car systems. You know what I mean? It's like they made a choice or for the car. They didn't. In a lot of cases, people just use the car system that was with the car. They didn't invest in that, and some do.
Oh yeah, right, right. I knew a guy that had like a real high-end BMW back in the early 2000s, and every time I'd get into his car, I would be like, "Why does this song have so much reverb on it?" I guess the stereo had like a reverb pad on it to give it like more of a reverb sound. It was so terrible.
That
Oh, it
was
was
also.
awful.
Yeah, that was usually, you had that in home stereo systems as well.
Oh,
Yeah, to make it sound like a
just
hall.
yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was. It drove me nuts. But that's funny. So what are you working on now? What's on your calendar for records? Do you have stuff on what you got going on now?
I just finished a Yes 50-year anniversary live album. It's a double CD and it's actually 7 vinyl sides.
Wow.
Then I worked with a band from Sweden called Sabaton. They're really big there. They're kind of a heavy metal band, but they're not traditional heavy metal. They have these stories of wars, and they're really good in presenting them. And music is it's catchy, but it's catchy because it's very anthemic, very powerful. Right. It's really good. And that album had different versions of that album as well. So you have the normal version, and then with other options, and then an orchestral version, and a lot of that.
Wow.
I did. Huh? And
That's interesting.
Check them out, Sabaton. And then I did a original soundtrack mastering for the album of a movie called We Die Young, which is a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. Like he's starring there. So that was just the soundtrack that you buy, not in the movie, but what you buy after. And then I did a few more records for the European market. An artist called Abeth. He used to be in a band called Immortal. I did some bluegrass stuff. I did some classical stuff, orchestral stuff. I did a piano, like a Schubert piano album that an artist was just playing piano, and I did that.
Nice. Now, when you're doing these jobs, are you using computer programs? Are you using mostly outboard gear, or is it a combination of both outboard gear and computer?
The computer is the player and recorder. So anyway, you're always using the computer to play the file, go into the desk,
sure,
back. A lot of times when I do singles, I usually just use the board here, the equipment here. Sometimes if I have to tweak it, I'll tweak it in the box in addition. But when I do records, like albums or EPs,
yeah,
in some cases, I'll do mostly here and then adjust, a few more things in the box. It really depends, but I'm not opposed to any way of working. My tendency is always to start with the desk, which has, all the pieces of stuff that I use. And
so you mainly use outboard gear. You're not using like a mastering software, like you're using mainly you're going out to the outboard gear, doing it physically, and then bringing it back in from the desk.
Yes, and then if treatment is needed in the box, then I do what's needed in the box. Yeah, but some records don't even have anything in the box except volume change. Like I just did this orchestral record.
Sure.
There's nothing in the box except I changed a few volume levels of a few tracks, 0.2 dB, 0.3 dB, and everything was done here. So some records are just all done here except volume levels, and some records are here plus some EQ treatments and volume and stuff like that in the computer. And most singles, because I do only on the desk.
Do you ever get someone's work and you're like, oh, this mix does not sound that great, or these guitars sound terrible, what am I going to do? I got to beef these things up? Or do you ever get that situation?
Yeah, we get a mix. Any mastering engineer that's been working for a lot of years will tell you, we get a mixed bag of everything. Sometimes we get a mix that's really good in terms of balancing, but it doesn't have the great tone. Then you work the tone. Sometimes you get a mix that has the right tone, but still needs the mojo. Sometimes you get mixes that are totally off balance, but do have a tone. Then you kind of need to say, hey, there's a problem here and here and here, or not. You get a mixed bag of everything.
Do you send a mix back in any of those cases? Would you send a mix back and be like, this I can't work with. You have to bring this down, or you have to give it to me with this. Like, have you ever got that type of situation?
Yeah, I mean, I try to do it in a practical manner. I'll tell the guy or person who's involved, I'll say, look, I can work with it as is, but the result won't be as the desired result. It will be a big compromise, or you can just go back and make a few tweaks, and I can work with that.
Right.
So, yeah, I do. I think for the sake of the project, a lot of times it's better to go and make those fixes than to ignore them. Now, there are situations where the circumstance don't allow that. For example, it's old mixes that were done that can't be recalled. There's no files, and then you just have to work with it as is. Or that mixer just left that project and went to a different project, and you can't go back. Or there was some politics involved, or issues, or they can't get the files. Then you just deal with it as is. Or sometimes the guy that worked on it just doesn't want to make the changes. It's not, they're like, no, I'm keeping it as is. And then it's like in your hands. You do what you can.
Sure.
And sometimes the producers or artists understand that, and they actually go and do it. And some people can take it the wrong way and say, no, we don't want that. And some of them will actually leave you and go to somewhere else because they want to hear, oh, yeah, it's amazing. It's like,
oh, yeah, of course.
Fun.
Yeah, they want to be, they want the stroke.
They want the stroke, yeah. So.
Yeah, that's real. Now, so everybody here knows, how did you get in? You're originally from Israel, yes? And how did you get involved in this business? What happened? What did you do?
Well, in Israel, I was working. I was doing mastering for some bands, and I was doing also DJing and music journalism, and I had a radio show back when internet radio just started, and I DJed at clubs, and I had a licensing company, and I distribution, and I had bands of mine that I recorded, and I just found myself gravitating to mastering more and more. And then, what was it? I think 12 years ago, I just made the decision to move to America, and I went to work for producer Sylvia Massey, and I flew to America to a place called Weed, where she had her studio, and I worked for her. Then, after a while, I decided to move to LA, and the move to LA was a good one for me. And I was mastering mostly in the night because I just came to LA, so I had a really quick run working for Sam Ash for 4 months.
Okay.
I was working in the pro audio department during the day, and in the night I was mastering. So I did that.
Now that was Sam Ash Sunset?
No, that was in a Canoga Park.
The Canoga Park Sam Ash. Okay.
Yeah. So I was working at Canoga Park for 4 months, and then I finished. I decided that I can't do both mastering and working at Sam Ash because it was taking too much time of any of those. So, and at the time I was already doing Ingrid Malmsteen, and I was already doing records for Rob Halford. He had a band called Fight, and we were mastering Fight. And later on, I was doing.
Oh, I liked.
So I did the second. I mastered the second Fight record, Small Deadly Space.
Yeah.
And then later on, I was doing a lot of the Rob Halford catalog of live shows, DVDs, Blu-rays, and also 2 studio albums, Winter Songs and Made of Metal, and then Live in Anaheim, Live in Super Satin Arena, Rock in Rio, Live Insurrection, 5.
Nice.
A lot of that. So I was already starting to do those things, but I was working at Sam Ash, and slowly I figured it's like, okay, this takes time. So I decided to leave it, and I was just doing, after 4 months, I was just doing mastering.
Very cool. And you're up there, and you're still in the valley. We don't have to say where, but you're up in the valley.
Yeah.
It's nice up there. Like I said, for all the people that know my show, I always talk food, and there's a great delicatessen over there in Northridge called Brent's that has a great corned beef. It's nice to be able to, what you do, you kind of work by yourself. You're in your that bubble and you're listening to your ears. But do you ever do stuff and people come back and they're like, yeah, I wish it had more this or more that? I guess you kind of said that. People will say they want more highs or more lows or.
In the end of the day, even if I make it right, if it fits them, great. If it doesn't fit them and they need a change, they'll ask for it, and that's fine. And I always tell them, if you need me to do something, tell me, because I don't want you to not tell me what you think and then later on feel like I should have told him, or I didn't, or you felt it's not polite to tell me. In the end of the day, I want you to be happy with your record, and if it means we need to add another dB or half dB of something, let's do it, or 2 dB, whatever dBs it's needed, we'll do it. That's what's important, to make it reach that finish line. And sometimes there's limitations to what you can do with what you have, but at least we're trying, or we're trying to figure out what's possible. And sometimes we find that actually going a different direction is even better. There are times where we took a record, that the band wanted a certain direction, and it actually didn't sound that great with that direction. Then we went to a totally different direction, and it actually sounded organic. It sounded real. It sounded like not plastic. It sounded right to the material. And sometimes that could be lo-fiing it, or it could be just heading to a different direction that is not as sparkly or not as bassy, or sometimes the opposite. Sometimes you want to go darker because it just makes the songs feel darker. There's so many ways to take it, and not always what you think in the beginning is what it's supposed to be. It might take a few tries to figure out that actually a different direction will actually make the songs feel better, or bring the message out more to the listener. So sometimes bands also tell me, oh, we like the sound of this record, but that record doesn't sound any close to what you're doing. And when you're trying to get to that sound, it actually reveals bad things. It reveals, I don't know, S's in the vocals that are too loud, or cymbals that are washy and hashy and harsh, or other stuff, or too low end. And then you just find what really fits, because sometimes you like a certain sound of a record because that sound fits that record, that band, that arrangement, the composition, the production. When it doesn't, it sits with what you're doing.
Oh, no, for sure. And it's funny because sometimes mastering, you'll hear the mastering and it just sounds like the quality of the record got really rich. And then sometimes you'll hear mastering and you'll be like, oh, that really changed the sound of that record. Like that woke that album up. So you could tell when something comes in as a great mix, or something was like, yeah, they were striving for something, but then you got to go another way. What was the instrument you started on? You said you played in bands in Israel. What was your instrument?
Bass.
You're a bass player. All righty.
There now. I played bass. I don't call myself a bass player, but I played bass for a lot of years in my bands in Israel. But it wasn't because I was a bass player that could be like a hired bass player. It was more of me being the person who wrote a lot of things in the bands, or being part of the band's position and arrangement. So I could write my lines right. I could, it wasn't like me as a session player. Oh, give me the note, show me the notes and I'll do it. No, I'm not that type of bass player.
Sure. Well, no, there's all kinds. And on my channel, there's lots of guys. There's all levels of player. There's the kind of player that can write and play like beautifully. And then there are guys who can read a chart and play like they've played their whole life, like Jameson. It's a very rare thing when you see a guy like Jameson who can read a chart and he's playing the bass line to Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, Baby. And it's like people study that song for years. It's a guy who spent 2 minutes on it. You know what I mean? And a lot of people, some people are more creative and they're not the schooled player and can play. It's all kinds that make the world go round.
I was just like, when I was a bass player in those bands, only now I can really, I also thought that back then, but now I can actually say it. I was a bass player in my bands, I wasn't a bass player. Like, I wasn't
Sure.
somebody who you could hire to do session work and get it done. But in my bands, I could get it done. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think you could say that about every band. I mean, you could say that about AC/DC. I don't think Cliff Williams is going to be playing bass for Chaka Khan anytime soon, but he definitely laid down that straight eighth note for AC/DC, and Michael Anthony from Van Halen,
I think they're still better than me. I, I think both are still better examples than me.
Cliff Williams even?
Dude,
Oh, come on.
take all his years of playing. If you could tour the amount of days he toured and play the notes that he played for the long time that he played.
No, I think those guys are great. Don't even get me wrong.
Right.
I think there's something great in the simplicity into stuff too.
But it's not just the simplicity; it's also influential. There's people, big bass players, who were influenced by them. So
Sure.
what they brought to the table was important. Not everybody is a John Entwistle or a Geddy Lee or a or a Jaco, but
right. And you don't. It's most of the time you don't want that. It's like those guys work like. I mean, Entwistle works for the Who, in my opinion, because I think Townsend is a drab player. I don't really find anything. He's trying to get the most out of a D chord, and then you got Entwistle wailing away. It sounds fantastic. But if you had a guy that was really, could really play, then you kind of want the bass to be a little bit more static. You know what I mean? It just depends on what the.
Well, you have to look at the Who as a whole, okay? Pete gives the riff, the basic riff, okay? Then you got Keith Moon filling in the gaps, and Entwistle and him are like playing together, duck season, rabbit season. You know what I mean? Like they're all doing that. And then Roger on top is, bringing his thing. So that's the Who. And it's not as if Pete would do more riffs. It's if Pete would do more riffs, it doesn't mean Entwistle will have to tame down. It would just mean that the building blocks of the Who would change. And it wouldn't be the Who. It would be some Who else.
Right, but I don't know if the guitar parts got more busy and built outside of that riff. I don't know that Entwistle would be as palatable of what he was doing, or he would have to tame it down, which kind of he does in a couple of songs.
Yeah, there are things like that. But look at Zeppelin, for example. Okay, John Paul Jones still does movements in the songs, and Page is more than just riffs. He has layers of stuff.
Sure.
But
Bonham is laying the greatest groove ever.
Yeah.
And John Paul Jones is playing over a much nicer groove, a much better pocket.
Much more solid groove. Solid and heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not just solid, even swinging. If you listen to songs like "Fool in the Rain," you could never get Keith Moon to play a groove. That's a groove, and I don't think
solid
Moon has groove.
When I say solid, when you get the groove, a Zeppelin groove is like, think of it as a loop. It stays. Bonham was very solid. Keith Moon was like Animal in the Muppets. That's Keith Moon.
Agreed.
So that's
agreed. The real me.
Yeah.
That might be my favorite Keith Moon drum.
Yeah. That's actually a more solid song. A way more solid.
Yes.
And the bass is yeah.
Right.
I love that song. It's a great song. And it's it's
well, I think it exemplifies it's the Who stepping out of what I consider to be the Who's real thing, which is it's a way more solid groove.
And they have too. Songs like "Who Are You" is also solid.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, we got to that record. To me, that's like those two albums are their best. Quadrophenia and "Who Are You," in my opinion, are their two best albums. Only because maybe when I was 10, I got Who Are You? And it was such a big record for me. Like, what was Had Enough is on that, and Sister Disco. And uh, I'm not a huge Who fan, I have to say. Those two albums would be the only two I would take with me if I had to go on a desert island and I had 100. But they're not making my top five.
Well, I was just giving an example of the Who because it was one of those
No, I
bands
know, but
grew up on.
the way you talked, I felt like you really liked them.
Well, I like a lot of music. It's just I grew up on a lot of the Who stuff, but like for example, the thing about John Entwistle is a lot of times you don't know it's bass because it's very occupied and but it's filling the song, so that's all. But I just gave an example, Entwistle, but I can give you examples like of bass players that are very solid in their playing. People like David Ellefson from Megadeth. You know, I think he's a
Sure.
great bass player. I really think he's a great bass player. He brings exactly what's needed to the band, and it holds it, and you can hear, what he's doing. And of course, Steve Harris or stuff, people like that who are very influential and just bringing something very unique to their playing. And but that's a different story. The whole thing with
No,
the
I
band.
love all those guys. I have to tell you, I play bass in a project here. I'm playing in a funk band, and I really like the R&B guys over the rock guys for me, just for where the pocket and that feel is. But I do love, like, I mean, I was a big Steve Harris fan. I'm a huge, I think Ellefson. I think the Megadeth albums from Rust in Peace to Cryptic Writings are some of the best albums in metal. Those four albums, Rust in Peace, Countdown to Extinction, Euthanasia, and Cryptic Writings. I think those albums are awesome.
I would recommend
You
checking
know.
He Sells But Who's Buying, which was the second album. There's
Oh, I know.
amazing,
I have it.
amazing bass.
Yeah.
Amazing. I was like,
Oh,
as a kid, I was like, wow, like
yeah.
the Conjuring, and I agree with you. R&B, like original R&B music, uh, the bass was a different case. It was um, the instrumentation of the song would let the bass dictate a lot more, and especially as you go back in time, music wise, you start understanding how much the bass was not just an instrument. It was way more than that foundation, and it would lay more than the groove too. Yeah,
Are you familiar at all with the acid jazz movement out of England in the 90s?
I remember. Yeah, because there was a lot of that electronic with jazz, and it was interesting because a
But they
lot of
had a lot
bass
of great bass
riffs
players.
is what
They had a lot of great bass players.
right,
A lot of great bass players. Now the brand new heavies,
right. A lot of
Jamiroquai.
it was based on bass riffs, and acid jazz had electronics in it. Some didn't have electronics,
Yeah,
and a lot of it was sampling as well with loops, and some of it was more.
great soul.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, it's just great soul.
yeah. I think also that era had a great sound too. Going back to like sound engineering in a way, or mastering, or a lot of those records
Absolutely.
sounded really good. And I grew up on a lot of records, and um, you know, uh, I learned that even not great sounding records sometimes are great for what they are because that non-great was exactly what was needed. And in time, you start learning that not everything has to be pristine. Not everything has to be a hi-fi system record to check. You know what I mean? Like, and
Well, well, what's a fun instrument too is a lot of, like, if you grew up in the 80s, you were probably like in high school around like when The Cure was putting out Disintegration,
it
or
was
you were before high school.
no, I was just entering high school. That was 1990 or 91. Yeah, a love song.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, but
Austin
if you
Bates.
listen to a lot, yeah, Love Song was great. It's all kind of like I always thought Love Song was a ripoff of Under the Milky Way by The Church.
Church. Yeah,
But if you listen to a lot of that record, you can hear he's also playing a bass six.
yeah, because he had that. He had the guitar that was a bass. Yeah.
That's right. You could hear the bass playing real simple stuff, and the bass six is playing all this beautiful. I mean, in the together, I love those records. I was a big Disintegration fan. There was a band out of Scotland called the Blue Nile, which I don't know if you ever heard of them.
Heard of the name?
And the Smiths. The Smiths had just broken.
Yeah, the Smiths had.
Yeah,
really nice
I was really into 80s things.
Yeah, by the way, The Cure, if you go really back, songs like The Forest, it's driven by bass.
Oh, Forest. It's on the Gray album. Let me just try to think of what it's. Is it Faith?
It's either the first or the second. It's the
second album.
Second album could be. I forgot the names, but it's one of the old albums. It's one of it's one of those songs that was more of a gothic song, or Charlotte sometimes.
I love a Forest. Oh yeah, great.
Yeah, a lot of the bass too. Even bands like Sisters of Mercy, Craig Adams, who was the bass player, a lot of those bass lines, which later on he went to form The Mission with Wayne Hussey, those bass lines are amazing. They really hold a song.
Oh, I always love this Corrosion. I always love that tune.
That was Patricia. I forget her last name, Patricia Morrison or something. She was playing bass on that, I think.
Oh,
unless yeah, but that was a later. That was the second sister. Well, they had a lot of singles and EPs, and then they had First, Last, and Always, and after that, Craig Adams left. But the bass lines on
they had the album
amazing. Floodland was called. That's the one with
Floodland.
Yeah, and there's a lot of bass there too. And then they had Vision Thing, which was more of an American type of sound. It's still good bass.
So you like the industrial stuff? Did you like Ministry's first album, the one that they hate that I happen to love, With Sympathy?
Well, the first one they had was a pop record, Ministry. They started.
Yes, I love it.
The thing is, I grew up on a lot of music, so for me, I would like Dirk and the Dominoes and Zeppelin and the Who and Purple, and stuff like that. Sure. But at the same time, I would listen to the Sisters of Mercy, The Mission. I would listen to Fields of the Nephilim. I would listen to industrial stuff. Some Ministry, Skinny Puppy. Trepon and Pal, which is a French band, which later on I did like 4 records with them.
Oh, nice.
Some stuff I mentioned already. There was a lot of, I was into metal as well, and punk, and
sure,
a lot of types of music, electronic, like the old electronic music, Jean-Michel Jarre, and
sure. I listen to everything. Have you ever heard of an electronic band called Fila Brasilia?
No.
They have an album called Maim That Tune, MAIM That Tune. I highly recommend it. I think that it's one of the best electronic albums around.
Well, also, by
Came
the way,
out in '95.
Also, by the way, at that time I was also listening to bands like UZIM, Fusion Band, and I was also into bands like, like Fishbone, or some
Love Fish,
or some. I just liked a lot. I had different bands. I had a metal band. I had a rap metal band. I had a speed metal band. I had a industrial band. I had a lot of different bands, and I liked, experimental music.
It's good to listen. It's good to listen to, and it's good to play everything. I listen to everything. I play everything. I think I've seen Fishbone live from about 1988 to today. I might have seen them 10 times at least. I used to run into Norwood Fisher used to come in, super nice, and I think Fish now is playing drums for 24/7 Spies out of New York, out of the Bronx.
Yeah, could be. That's another band that I remember when back then it was just coming out. Actually, a friend of mine, I think one of their first albums, but it's that era. I was also into Nick Cave, and I was also into a lot of 80s new wave stuff, just a combination of things, some Bauhaus, some, some Smith stuff. I like the Smith stuff,
Well, I always thought I always thought that when Ben Orr died from the Cars, that they should have asked Peter Murphy to join because he has that similar voice. I don't mind you coming here and wasting all my time. Right? I could just picture Peter Murphy singing that when Ben Orr died.
I think that he sounds more like David Bowie. I think because Peter Murphy
Oh,
has.
I don't know.
I mean, just listen to
I
the
love.
house version of Ziggy Stardust. Just listen to that.
No, I know, but he's doing Bowie there. If you listen to, remember the song "Cuts You Up," his
Yeah,
solo
great song.
sing.
I just saw Peter
Yeah,
Murphy
whoa.
this week at a show.
Oh, you did?
Well, actually, it's the week that was. Yeah, I mean, yeah, "Cuts You Up" was an amazing song, and he had another song very famous.
Marlene Dietrich's favorite joke.
No, I'm trying to remember which one from
Yeah,
Holy Smokes.
yeah.
When you see the light. No, forget the name of it. Anyway, I think that Peter Murphy has that quality that he can be the David Bowie and be the goth.
Yeah.
And maybe you're right. Maybe he can be the band.
So if you listen to Ben Orr stuff like "Life's the Same," "I'm Moving in Stereo," I could picture Peter Murphy filling those shoes.
Okay. I can't say no.
I just think,
right?
but I just think that would be a great thing for the Cars to go back out and have a singer replace Ben Orr that sounds and kind of looks like him. They have the thin, drawn face. It would have been a nice thing. I mean, if I was the management behind the Cars, I'd be like, this is a no-brainer here. And he's not really well known to most Cars fans. I mean, how many people do you know? You say Bauhaus or Peter Murphy, people look at you like, who's that? It's not something you bring up and everybody knows.
Right. I think some know Peter Murphy more out of Bauhaus than in Bauhaus because his career later on actually boomed in a way that, he was known. But, he also got in from the movies because he was in, what's that famous movie? It was a movie that he was in. I forgot the name.
Oh, I'm not sure.
In the 80s.
Wasn't he also the old Max Hell commercial sitting in the chair?
I don't know, but I know which commercial you talk about with the hair going back. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was him. I watched a YouTube special on him called "What's My Bag," and he's in Amoeba Music, and they're talking, and he talked about being the guy in that ad.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. That he was modeling back when he was like in Bauhaus for Maxell audio tapes or something like that. He's sitting in that chair.
Yeah, with the hair going back. It's like the profile. I know. Wow. You know what? That's kind of
look that up.
Oh, look.
For that, that's what I saw.
So a lot of the music that I was hearing influenced me as a musician, but also in the sound. Like when I work on a project that sounds a bit goth or a bit dark, I can take it to that direction. Like I was working on a record from quite a famous band, and immediately I felt like Susie and the Banshees feel in it. And I was like, and I told the artist, I said, "You guys are like into Susie and the Banshees?" He's like, "Yeah, we were into, yeah." So that album really felt that direction. So I felt it. So it just makes you, go by your intuition and, move the knobs to make it feel like that.
Sure. Yeah, I was a Susie and the Banshees fan a little bit. I was spoiled because I got really into the Cocteau Twins. And it was such lush production and such a great sound that it's like when I went back to listen to Susie and the Banshees, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like some instruments are stepping on the other and it wasn't as clean. You know what I mean?
Right, but that's what if you think about it, what was Susie and the Banshees? It was a post-punk band with goth influences.
Right. Oh,
and
yeah, sure.
And who was playing guitar for them for a while? Robert Smith from The Cure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, it's like you can't put Dead Can Dance in the same equation with Susie and the Banshees because it's a different thing,
Oh, no. I said Cocteau Twins, not Dead Can Dance.
Cocteau Twins in the same because.
But I love Lisa Gerard's voice too. I mean,
Sorry
awesome.
that I got mixed up, but what I'm saying is like Cocteau Twins, the whole thing behind Cocteau Twins was that lush feel. You know, it's an immersive feel. The Cure was not about that.
Yes.
Cure was about, Robert Smith, it's like a lot of personalities in him. Songs like In Between Days is totally far from songs like The Forest, or totally far from songs like um, um,
I have a theory about that, though. I have a theory. I feel that Robert Smith had his own thing going on, and at the same time, he was trying to borrow from a lot of what he heard around him that he liked. Because I can pull out songs for you and show you songs that came out before the Cure songs, and then show you a song that the Cure did that's not really like the Cure, but is really like this other song. And I'll start with The Walk. You remember the song The Walk? Which came out shortly after Don't Go by Yazoo.
Yeah.
I won, don't you know? I'll never let you go. Right? So I feel like he wanted that sound. In Between Days sounds like Age of Consent by New Order. I want to be the one to tell you just what you want me to.
But I think New Order was way after, because In Between Days was not.
New Order's Age of Consent came out in 1983. In Between Days is 85.
It's 85. Okay, so okay, I was
I'm
not.
telling you, it's right at
Wow. Okay, but also had a song like
1988.
Caterpillar. Remember the song?
1988, Under the Milky Way came out.
Right, and then Love Song was 90
Uh,
or 89. Yeah.
I'm telling you, you can follow when they write a song that's not in the vein of the Cure. Just look to see what was coming out around, because I think Robert Smith was very much in tune with. Let's try to get. I like that. Otherwise, because I think, like, to me, I'm a huge Cure fan. There are 4 songs that were outtakes from the Wish album, and I think it's the best 4 songs the Cure ever did.
Really?
A Play for Today, This Twilight Garden. They're on the album Join the Dots, which are all the B-sides.
Yeah.
Play for Today, This Twilight Garden. There's 2 other ones, and I can't think of the name, but they're phenomenal. Those 4 outtakes from Wish are better than any song on Wish.
Even Wish, when that album came out, it kind of was the sign of times. It kind of works well with what you're saying. And I think if I look at the big picture, The Cure was what Pink Floyd did to the prog, is what Pink Floyd did to the prog, Cure did for the goth. It made it not commercial but accessible. They have this song.
Yes.
They have this song. I forgot what's the name of it. It's also, it doesn't sound like a normal Cure. It's Why Can't.
Which album? Oh, Why Can't I Be You?
Kind of like Expose What You Don't Know. Why hurt you?
Yeah.
Kind of that vibe, even though it's not the same era.
Yeah. Why can't I be you? Ba-da-ba. Yeah. I mean,
Maybe
The
it's from
Cure's a great band.
Or is it from that album?
It's from Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me.
I said Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. Yeah. So not I'm comparing it to Expose, but I'm saying that he took a lot of that 80s orchestra hit or brass hits or something that was very, very hip at that time, and he put it in. So you might be right.
Oh, I'm totally. Yeah. Well, I think Robert Smith was definitely not a guy in a bubble. Like, if you listen to I think you would find that Matt Johnson's music is him going through a change in himself, and it's a guy in a bubble. It's not like he's borrowing from what's going on around him. It's really their own thing. When you listen to The Cure, with each album, you're like, this guy's really absorbing what's going on around him.
Maybe that's what was Maybe that was what the secret of Sauce of the Cure is, bringing themselves, but they always have something surrounding them. So it's never, oh, this is the Cure. No, this is the Cure now. This is the Cure. This is the. They evolved.
Right.
It's not like each album was throwing you to a different place that you wouldn't recognize the band. You would still recognize the band, but it will take you to like to different eras. And Disintegration was a very dark album, but then
Well,
Wish
there's right.
was not.
Wish, yeah, Wish is very, very. Wish reminds me of if The Cure listened to Heaven or Las Vegas by the Cocteau Twins and said, "Oh, I like that swirly ethereal sound," and then you hear that next album and it's all real pop.
Well, I think that um, another example would be Depeche Mode, by the way, because at the
Great.
same era, like Violator, which to me is the best Depeche Mode album ever, it's the darkest.
No, it's not even close.
What do you mean?
Violate is the best album they have by far.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, there's
phenomenal.
nothing that touches it, and the thing is, they only had two hits there, hits that went radio wise. They had three, but two Personal Jesus and Enjoy the Silence were the two main singles that
Well,
rocked.
Truth was big.
Truth came later on. The first two.
But it's the same.
No, I know, no. But what I'm saying is, the first two singles that hit the worldwide market. The first one was Enjoy the Silence, because it hit the dance markets too, and then Personal Jesus was the alternative market. Policy of Truth was an extension of it, but the whole record, songs like Halo, even songs like Policy of Truth, most of the songs, World in My Eyes, all these songs, they're amazing. The production is amazing. It's, some guy I know who loved that song, loved that album. One day I talked with him because I saw he posted about it. I said, listen, I'm inviting you to my studio here so you can hear it the way you never heard it. And he's like, nah, come on. And I'm like, no, dude, you're going to hear it the way you never heard it. He came here and he was like, wow, I never noticed all that stuff. It's like,
yeah. I mean, the record is so phenomenal. I mean, World of My Eyes, Sweetest Perfection. What I loved was Blue. Put it on now, don't say you. Blue Dress and Clean is a great tune. The whole album's phenomenal.
To me, Halo was the biggest thing. Like Halo,
you wore guilt like shackles on your feet, like a halo in reverse. I love it.
Good. But
oh, love it. Well, I have to say, to me, in 1989, 1990, when Disintegration came out, Violator came out, and I bought this album by a band I had never heard before called the Blue Nile Hats. Those three albums, to me, were probably some of the most influential albums of my life. And musically, still to this day, I love those three albums like nothing. And if you don't know the Blue Nile Hats album, I'm telling you right now, buy it and listen to it through your system. And just know that it came out when Violator and Disintegration came out. You're going to flip out. You're going to be like, how did I miss this? It's phenomenal. And it's electronica, and at the same time, it is melancholy.
Yeah, melancholy. Yeah.
It's ethereal and melancholy, and it's just. I know you're gonna love it. If you love Violator and Disintegration, you're gonna love Hats by the Blue Nile.
So Blue Nile is
it's
the band,
phenomenal,
and Hats is the record.
Hats is the record. It's a must-own. I tell everybody always. I even have, if you look behind me there, right there, that's a
Blue Nile.
When I went to the show in 1990, I went to the Hats tour. They handed out these these things, and I'm like, I got it framed right away. I'm like, oh, I gotta get, and I've had it since.
Wow, nice.
All right, listen, it's getting close to that time. I gotta go run and teach. Maor, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Do you have any social media that you want people to follow you on? Instagram or?
You can just type maorappelbaum.com for my website, or on Facebook, there's 5 accounts called Maor Appelbaum or Maor Appelbaum Mastering, and Instagram Maor Appelbaum Mastering. Just, check out some of my work. I'll be happy to work with people. And, Dave, if you have any questions, regarding, mastering now, feel free to ask. I mean, I'm here. Even though we went to the Who and the Cure and the Sisters of Mercy and all that,
Right.
Feel free to ask if you have anything you want to, for your life.
Thanks so much, man. Always great talking with you and great seeing you. All right, so everybody, thanks so much for coming and watching today. And as always, very good.
You're listening to Guitar Talk with Dave and John.